Today, as we open the 20th series of the podcast, whoop whoop, I am in conversation with Soulla Demetriou. She is a dear friend and a teacher who profoundly shaped my journey, and it feels wonderful to be welcoming her to this very first episode of a brand new series. And she's the author of a newly released book, You Have Always Been Enough. I mean, just that title, isn't that a wonderful thing to know? Soulla introduced me to self-compassion work and later to internal family systems, which helped to make sense of the parts work that I was already personally experiencing and practicing as a coach myself. Welcome to the Henny Flynn podcast, the space for deepening self-awareness with profound self-compassion. I'm Henny. I write, coach, and speak about how exploring our inner world can transform how we experience our outer world, all founded on a bedrock of self-love. Settle in and listen and see where the episode takes you. And our paths have been beautifully interwoven ever since. And in this conversation, we explore Soulla's journey from corporate London through pain and suffering to yoga, mindfulness, self-compassion, and eventually internal family systems. And we see why IFS felt like the jigsaw piece that made sense of everything for her. We see how our protective parts are actually expressions of love, trying to keep us safe, and what shifts when we turn toward them with curiosity instead of judgment. We also explore the moment when I realised I'd been making these awful faces at myself in the mirror and what that part needed to hear to feel safe enough to stop. And lastly, you'll hear that trust features very strongly throughout the episode. And we see how and why self-trust might be the greatest gift any of us can cultivate, and how the parts work helps us, or helps to bring us into that connection with ourselves. So this is a long, intimate conversation between two practitioners who really love this work. We follow tangents, we cry, we laugh, and we let what needs to emerge come forward. And that's really at the heart of the work. I ought to add that we start the recording kind of part way into a conversation. I just felt like we needed to begin. And so we began where we began. Hopefully you'll be able to catch up with us as we go. And I truly hope you are going to enjoy the depth and breadth of this conversation with a truly beautiful human. Hello, Soulla.
Hello, Henny.
So, settling in,
Mm,
and actually that word medicine that you just sort of brought in, I think that's such it's such a beautiful and far-reaching word, particularly when it's used in the context of this work that you do and the work that I do, where it's non-pathologizing medicine. That feels really important. I think I might like to return to that at some point in our conversation.
yeah, I'm an enormous fan of the non-pathologizing and the freedom and space that comes with that. Definitely. I was just actually talking about this with someone about running a workshop, and we were exploring like what would be the key takeaways that you would want someone to have from internal family systems. And it is this idea of like, this is not who you are. These are parts of you, and these parts are not bad. They've just adapted the best way that they could. And I will always be reminded of the story shared by Gabor Mate about nurses bringing in clients, patients to rehab and saying to them, well done for finding a way to survive. Because that's all an addict's done, really. They found a way to survive. Now maybe it's time for another way.
Mm.
And I love that. I just love the freedom when we step away from things that can feel so bad or negative, or that we can resist, or we can banish from ourselves, the anxieties, depression. And instead we open our arms and just say, this is a part of me, and this part is carrying such a great load.
Mm.
And how would it be to be with it now in the way it might need to know that it can soften and surrender just a little, not because I'm telling it to do that, but because it might feel safe to do that itself.
Yeah. And that to me, that not because I'm telling it to do it. Oh,
Mm.
because I think it's this illusion of control, the thing that Tara Brach talks about, this idea that we can control our environment, or we can control our internal environment, that we so often that kind of comes with the language of must and should and ought, and
Mm.
um and just listening to you there, that sense that when we're doing the work with the parts, it's not about telling them how they should show up, or where they should be, or what they should do, or what they should now think, or how they should now feel. It's literally having a conversation with that part in such a way that the part is able to express itself, um, and we're able to accept what we hear and be able to meet the
Mm.
part in a way that we feel equal. And it's sort of, and I'm really mindful that like we kind of dived into this whole topic, and it's all,
We're straight in there. We're just
straight
in
in.
there.
And the thing is, of course, like when you're doing this work, you're able to operate on so many different levels simultaneously. When you're doing this work with the parts, you're able to operate on so many different levels. And it, from the outside, it can sound weird and like how, and just sounds a bit kind of bonkers that you can talk to a part of yourself and have this relationship with a part of yourself. And yet, when you actually step toward it, it feels like the most natural thing in the world.
Mm.
Um, so I feel I would love to ask you, Sula. Um, God, there are so many starting points for this conversation, which aren't the where we started today, but like so many other starting points. Um, oh, what I really want to ask you is, what was it that led you to the parts work, and
Mm.
learning the internal family systems work, knowing that there was so much that came before it?
Mm. It's like the suspense then of what the question was going to be. All my parts were like, what are you going to ask? Are we going to be able to answer it? Are we going to be able to give a good answer to it? I love sharing when I do podcasts, the parts that are coming up. Because there's always that part that's like, are we going to mess it up? Are we going to say something stupid? And then I have to remember, like, I didn't make this up. I have been doing this for like 15 years. And that trust. And that's the parts work, right? Isn't it? It's that continual listening, like listening with care and tenderness, that is happening all the time, and we integrate it more and more. Over the years, I'm sure it's the same for you. And there's a whole situation going on within in any one given moment. But to go back to your question, I'm glad you asked it, because I actually sent an email last week to the person that introduced me to internal family systems, um, thanking them and saying, I have just written a book, and I want to thank you because you introduced me to internal family systems. And so that person was Sarah Powers. For those that might be familiar with her, she is the creator of Insight Institute. She was also one of in a way, the creators of Yin Yoga back in the day. So she's a mindfulness, Dharma, incredible teacher, spiritual teacher. And my path to her, to go back a little bit further, started by realizing that I was suffering a lot. I was in a lot of pain and there was a lot of suffering. And so I set out on a journey to try and understand how to fix that or how to free myself from that because I felt I was losing just more and more of myself. It was like the essence of me was just so obscured by anxiety and by worry and by this emotional dysregulation I was experiencing. And so I kind of broke free from life as I knew it in London, in corporate land. I set out on a journey. I trained as a yoga teacher first, partly because I wanted to be able to earn money anywhere in the world. That was kind of one of my drivers, but also there was a deeper wisdom that this was something important. This was going to be something important in my life. I didn't know why, but it was. And the more I went into yoga, mm, the more awareness I built and the more I realized how yoga alone kind of asked questions but didn't necessarily bring me the answers in a way that made sense for the pain I was experiencing. I'm being careful when I use the word pain and suffering because there was both. There's pain and then there was the suffering that was caused by the pain that I'd experienced in my life. Both are true and at the time, going back, I mean, this is going back like 20-ish years, more or less. There was a lot of sense of kind of affirmation and love and light, the love and light movement. And, you know, the journey of yoga is about union and remembering the wholeness of our nature. But just telling ourselves that is oftentimes not enough.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not enough when you've been through a shed ton of trauma and when you're suffering, because then you're like suffering and then you're blaming yourself because you're like, I can't manifest myself out of the suffering, and that's just another way that we kind of beat ourselves up in a way. And it was when I remember I started to read Pema Chodron, who's just such a wonderful teacher. And she said affirmation is like you cut off your arm and it's hanging off by a thread and you're shouting at it, I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me. When like blood's gushing out of your arm, it's like it's just not effective. It's just too much to ask of a human. And I think that's a little bit, with all respect to everyone and their journeys, in my experience, that's how it felt to me. There was just such accumulation of challenging experiences, and I couldn't just, believe my way out of it. And so that finding that curiosity, and I'm very grateful that I've always had, even in the darkest moments, like curiosity and some kind of spark in me that's kept me moving forwards and kept me saying there has to be another way. That took me into kind of work of Pema Chodron, which took me into mindfulness, which landed me into within that world, hearing one day, I can't remember exactly when, the teaching of Buddha that, paraphrase is to be is to experience pain, to be is to suffer, basically. And it was that sense of like, oh, I'm not doing it wrong. Like to be human is to experience these challenges, is to experience these pains and these challenges. And again, I'm using that, care, that word, the difference between care, pain and suffering, because, the teachings say that, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And that took me onto a journey of mindfulness practices, of the wisdom insight practices, which led me eventually to Sarah Powers, because I wanted to train as a yin yoga teacher. And then, of course, as is often the way, we'd go for one thing and we get the medicine that we need. So I went to train for yin without really understanding that it was actually a mindfulness training and retreat. And that began my journey of mindfulness, with these amazing teachers and my spiritual mentor who I've had now been working with for over 10 years, incredible woman called Ayala. And the mindfulness took me so far in that it allowed me to start finding. I'm giving you the long version. Were you
Mm.
after the long version of the
Yeah,
story?
yeah, I love the long
Okay.
version. I've got so
Okay.
many thoughts going through my head as I'm listening to you. I'm actually going to have to grab a piece of paper because there's things I want to come back to, but keep going.
Listeners, this might be a 6 hour podcast. We have a lot to share with you. Penny and I, we do like to talk. So within the mindfulness, I went down that path and it brought a lot of relief just understanding that, our about making peace with our imperfection, the Zen teachings of how suffering comes from making things more complicated than they are. And it was an incredible support to me to know that I was human and to know that pain wasn't something that we dodge, and that the mindfulness practice allow me to cultivate this phrase which has become such a core to my teaching, which the pause between stimulus and response, um, which is often attributed to Viktor Frankl. It's actually not him, but it came by him. And that pause between stimulus and response is all to say it's a space where we start to recognize what's happening and learn how to be with it without turning away. But in that pause, it's like the understanding is what allows us to break the reactivity and to come into a new place of responding. So there was, as is always the case, thinking mindfulness, this is the one, this is the thing. I'm in for it. But what I actually found was having a lot of trauma, because when you've had a lot of trauma, mindfulness can be quite challenging. It's not actually always the one, certainly not alone, because you're basically saying to someone who's been through a lot of really difficult, painful experiences, I'd like you just to sit with all of those, please. And so, and also have ADHD. So you add another layer onto like of having like this internal restlessness. So I remember doing a silent retreat for a week. And I don't know how it would be today. I do believe it would be different, but in that moment, it was a certain kind of hell on earth for me. It was really tormenting. I came out of it and it was very challenging. And I was like, okay, so I can see, because I was there for a week being like, I'm aware of everything. I'm aware of everything. Now what? It's so painful. Then now what was self-compassion. And there's been a whole like cast of characters and these divine beings on earth who've guided me. Then now what was Tarbrack, and that was the balm for my soul, because it's like, okay, with presence, now I can start to respond with self-compassion. And so it came from mindfulness, then self-compassion, and that was such a gateway. And that's where the paths, because they say, mindfulness and self-compassion are like the wings of freedom, as they're called. And they're the first step of like the methodology that I work with, because it's like if we start here as our foundation, these are lifetime practices, we're already transforming so much. And so then with the mindfulness and the self-compassion, there came this possibility to start layering. I was lucky with the teachers I had to bring self-compassion. First of all, like, how can I be a friend to myself? And then there was this curiosity of like, oh, and where do I feel that in my body? And what shape does it have? And what words does it have? And how can I be with that? Does it have an age? So before IFS was even introduced, IFS was introduced, internal family systems. And then still studying with Sarah Powers, still, studying self-compassion. Sarah Powers introduced internal family systems on a training one weekend, and it was like just the jigsaw piece that made sense of everything. And for me, it just made sense, and it's continued to since then. I mean, that must be 9 years ago, maybe. And it's a practice for which I'm just so deeply grateful for, because it's been such a great support for me, but I've just seen it transform people, sort of free people to be their truest, most unburdened self. And Yeah, so I hope that everyone gets to experience themselves through this lens in one way or another in a way that makes sense to them because it's not a practice you do. It's not like you go and do 9 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's paradigm shifting. It's how you understand yourself and the
Yeah.
world. And it becomes just as we practice presence and we practice self-compassion, we bring our parts everywhere with us. And it just creates a completely new understanding of the world, both the world close to us, within us, and when we look at what's happening in terms of economically, politically, it just, you're like, parts, parts everywhere.
So, thank you. Thank you for sharing that and for like taking us on your journey. And I think there's like there are a number of things in there that really sparked thoughts for me. But one of them, just your closing point there about um, uh, how everywhere we look, we can recognize. For me, it began with recognizing that everywhere there are systems. And that was such a big part of my training in my coach training was in systemic and constellation work.
Mm.
And then when you and I did some work and you helped me under sort of meet the very first part that I connected with,
Mm.
um, and recognizing like, oh, so basically it's my internal system. And then it's like,
Mm.
oh, internal family systems. I understand it now. Like this kind of,
Mm.
it was, I remember there being this like the curtains part or the yeah, so that's really how it felt. It's like, oh, the veil parted and suddenly this like, oh, that's why this work with systems resonates so deeply within me because I recognize that I've been working with my internal system without
Mm.
knowing that that's what I've been doing, but all of the compassion work that I had been doing had been speaking to these parts of myself, but I didn't have the language or the kind of that very gentle framework that IFS gives us to be
Mm.
able to articulate what was happening. Does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah, it reminds me of a point you made earlier, which is we all have this language already. We speak, oh, a part of me wants to do this, a part of me wants to do that. And when you take someone into IFS, it's a deeply experiential process. It's a bit like it's somewhere between what might feel like a meditation and how you might imagine hypnosis in a way. It's not hypnosis, but you go into that kind of um gentle inner almost trance-like space, and when you allow someone to go through that or you take them into that space, when they come out they're like, that was completely bonkers, and it was also, I can't really doubt it because it
Yeah.
just arose
So
from within me,
real.
which is what you said earlier. It's like the sense of, I don't understand it, but it's truth,
Yes,
and it's
absolutely.
it's truth from a place that oftentimes we've never touched until
Yeah.
that moment. And can you imagine that you've got an entire family of these parts, or um, yeah, a family or a collective of parts within you that have been there your whole life. And then can you imagine if you're 25 or 35 or 45 or 65, and the very first time it's that you open the door and you go, hi,
Oh, hi.
hi guys. They're like, what?
Every yeah, and suddenly seeing sort of everyone who's here and also the ones that aren't, so
Mm.
this language of exiles that IFS uses, these parts that have been sort of pushed away or suppressed or ignored or tucked away, hidden away in
Mm.
some way. And and this work to bring our whole self home, I that for
Mm.
me is so, oh, just like my whole system softens when I recognize that work and
Mm.
and also, well, recognize it within myself, but also recognize it within the work with others.
Mm.
This just this gentle, warm, compassionate, welcoming home. of the whole of us. And I'm really mindful as I say that of, you talked about the Buddhist sort of practices that were part of your journey, or the Buddhist teachings that were part of your journey. And this idea that, you know, um, this sort of the correlation between pain and suffering,
Mm.
and how for so many of us in such a human way, the only way that we've been able to navigate the world has been to suppress, because the pain has been too painful to turn
Mm.
toward. And so, clever beings that we are, we learn all these strategies to distract, to suppress, to dissociate, to numb, and we push down the stuff that feels too hard in order that we can survive, in order that we can keep going in some way. And so much of this work, I think, so much of what I, have learned, and you are definitely, I would credit as being really the first sort of the first teacher that I had that I consciously recognized as a teacher. Obviously, like all through our lives, there are many, but I think you were the first person that I came across that I went, oh, hang on a minute. There's some stuff that this woman is saying, which is speaking so deeply to me. And this is before you trained in the IFS work. This was really about the compassion work. I feel like you gave me this kind of leapfrog directly into Tara Brach, actually, and
Mm.
radical compassion that um, meant that I was, yeah, sort of immersed in compassion right from the moment when my system was like at its most vulnerable, its most like open
Mm.
and raw and ready to receive. And luckily it was you, and not, something which might have, you know, taken me longer to navigate or to make sense of or whatever. Um, but I'm kind of mindful of this, the some of the, the complexity, or what can feel like the complexity or the challenge of this work is actually, it is about turning toward ourselves. And it is about this slow and very gentle releasing of some of the strategies and behaviors and the thought systems that we've had, that we've been using to try and keep ourselves free of pain. And
Mm.
actually, kind of what feels so counterintuitive is that if we turn toward ourselves with profound compassion, that stuff feels so much easier to bear when we actually
Mm.
do listen to what's going on inside. Um, but I think that then leads me on to something else that you said, which is that it's all very well being told this stuff. And I definitely recognize that there are, many sort of, wonderful humans kind of sharing, very like beautiful messages, maybe about like things like affirmations or whatever, or kind of love and
Mm.
light. But if we're not shown how, it can
Mm.
just feel like another burden to carry.
Mm.
Oh, now I've got to kind of heal myself. But if we don't know how to do it, it's incredibly difficult.
Mm. Yeah, I'm always reminded of from years of teaching yoga and running retreats and teaching people arm balances, for example. You've always got in yoga this like Bakasana crow pose that everyone wants to do, which is an arm balance. And it's like it feels impossible until you feel it in your body, even for a second, like really feel it.
I
And it's
remember
like,
doing one on retreat with you and just being absolutely flabbergasted that I could ever get my body to do that, I could ever trust my body enough to do it. Yeah.
but it's like once you have the feeling, you can remember the feeling of, in this case, an arm balance. But what if you've actually never felt safe? What
Yes.
if you've never felt compassion? What if you've never, part of our jobs as the people that sit opposite our clients is sometimes lending that energy so that you can have your own embodied experience of it. Because it's only once you really feel it, you can't tell someone they're safe if they've never felt safe. They need to feel what safety actually is. And, that's, I think, what's really beautiful about the IFS practice is that you have this felt embodied sense and experience of love, of compassion, of safety. And not only do you have that, but you have it from within yourself. Our job is to help people arrive at that point, but it's not to be that for all eternity. It's to help that person be that for themselves. And then you can not only feel this, have this experience of something you've yearned for consciously or unconsciously your entire life, but to find the resolution within yourself. I mean, imagine the what is the word I want to use? The trust and the hope and the courage and faith, so many words that come from that, from inner resourcing, that reparenting process, as we call it.
I think your analogy of the crow pose is really beautiful, actually. And when because so my like, oh, I
Mm,
remember that feeling. And then I heard myself work out what it was, and it was learning how to
mm,
trust my body, because I had never learned how to trust. I'd always, so for me, a big
mm,
part of my story was always rejecting my body, not trusting that I was strong enough, fit enough,
mm,
brave enough, capable enough to do things, to achieve things like physically,
mm,
and also rejecting myself with the way that I looked, and so much disconnection, which just makes me
mm.
just want
Let's
to
put just that we have to pause for a moment to allow for
oh,
like a hug of that.
just
Yeah.
so much love. I have so much love for her. I went, this is a slight segue. I went for a walk. There's a really tall, very feisty hill at the back of our house. And I've been walking up her every morning for the last few weeks, just as a way of like coming back into my body. And
Mm,
my legs were so tired this morning, and I had really big boots on, and I had to have a little chat with my body. So I was like chatting with my legs and just going, "It's okay, my darlings. Like, we're entirely capable of doing this. And it's okay, heart. You're entirely capable of moving the blood around. And it's okay, arms. You can help the
mm.
legs." Like this whole sort of thing. But this, in a way, it's like it's a version of parts work, because it's
Mm,
about like the language that we use to connect with ourselves
mm,
is so profound. And listening to you sort of talk about that crow pose, like for me, it was like it was a revelation that I could become so trusting of my own self, that I could hold myself in that impossible seeming posture and do it for myself and with myself, without having to look outside of me for
mm,
something else to make me feel safe
mm,
enough or safer. Like, to feel entirely safe with myself in that pose was really profound. And I think, so as you sort of then spoke and said, but what, because I had never felt like I could trust my body in that way. If you've never
mm,
felt compassion, if you've
mm,
never felt safety, if you've never heard words of comfort, like deep words of comfort, if you've never learned how to speak to yourself with
mm,
kindness, being told, well, that's what you now need, that's what you need to do, but
mm,
you don't know that it's even possible. Like, we can have that
mm,
intellectual kind of knowledge, oh, I should speak to myself more kindly, but if we don't know what that sounds like or what those words are,
Yeah.
So hard.
And I remember I have this really distinct memory many years ago of of wondering, in this practice of somewhere between self-love and somewhere between learning about self-compassion, I could see that there was a gap somehow within me, which is, hence this whole work about feeling enough, because I could see that that certainly wasn't the case. And I remember really reflecting on, is there a possibility to get behind the first thought? I'm going to say, I find it really hard to put this into words still. It's like I can practice self-love. I think I was using self-love as the term then, by kind of responding to my life in a way, or responding, caring for myself, let's put it. But like, can I get behind that moment of pain? So even earlier, the actual scaffolding of my system changes into one that has more capacity for love.
Mm.
It was like, rather than just being like, okay, now I'm going to respond, which is, where there's a lot of time spent. It's like, is it always just about responding in new ways, or is there a way that in time, what lies behind that starts shifting as well? I guess the foundations of our system. And that was before I found IFS. And I think IFS was really one significant, it was my significant answer to that. And even though life still involves responding, when there's a forgetting, I think like the cumulative shifts that happen in the system, I think there is like a baseline that has changed as well. So even though I'll always be responding in self-compassion, I'm always going to have to remember with my inner critical this or that to level. It's like the poem, I walk down a street and there's a hole and I fall in it. And you're familiar with that poem. You keep walking down the street and eventually you just walk around the hole in the pavement. You don't fall in it. It's like the holes are still there, but the amount of time you spend in them is different. And I think the self-compassion allows us ongoing um, in a daily practice to meet ourselves and respond with love. But the more we do that, I often think of it as like the reservoirs of self-compassion are filling. And so our baseline also starts shifting. And when you overlay that with the parts work, you actually get to reconcile some of the reasons that perhaps self-love and self-compassion was so obstructed in the first place.
Mm. And also recognizing that so many of the strategies that we might have used to numb the pain, to divert our attention from the things that feel uncomfortable about ourselves, from shame,
Hmm.
past behaviors, whatever, that they are constructed out of self-love. I think
Mm,
that's something that I found I found quite hard to
yeah.
navigate when I first started noticing, like, oh, okay, so I have this understanding that
Mm,
um I've been doing this in some way. And again, this is before I sort of came across IFS, and the kind of like the beauty of the simplicity of those teachings, and the way that Richard Schwartz has like translated that parts work
mm,
language. And um um I think I so one of my stories is I realized one day when I was looking in the mirror that I was pulling this horrible face at myself. I was cleaning my teeth and I was making myself have, like, the biggest double chin that I could. And I was like screwing my face up. I mean, honestly, Sula, it was like when I actually saw what I was doing in the mirror, it was like, oh my, like literally that voice of, oh my darling, what is happening here? And then the recognition that I'd been doing it for a really long time.
mm,
That every time I'd looked in the mirror when nobody else was there, I'd do some like funny, like face,
mm,
something to wound me. And so, two things from that. One, what a practice in self-compassion it was to start to shift that behavior. And now, when I catch sight of myself in the mirror, I kind of like it makes me laugh. I give myself, like I send myself love. It's like it, I mean, it didn't just happen overnight, obviously. It was quite a process.
Mm,
But also then sitting with this, like, so what was happening with the part of me that was making those faces in the mirror? And
mm,
how was that an expression of love? Or how was that an
mm,
expression of this part doing sort of doing the work that it felt it needed to do
mm,
in order to what? Keep me safe, stop
mm,
me getting too big for my boots. Uh, what was it? Like took me, it was such a, well, the curiosity of that, of sitting with that, and really ultimately recognizing it was a part that was just desperate to be seen,
mm,
absolutely desperate to be seen. And it felt so ugly
mm,
that the only way it could show itself was in private, in the mirror. And then the recognition that it was asking for something.
mm.
Um, why have I started telling you all of that?
Mm. Well, and thank you for sharing with all of us. And Sanjit, there's on one side, I wanted to kind of share these questions that I often train clients to take out of the session, which is when you notice something coming up. The first one, in this moment, the story I'm telling myself is, or in this moment, what might this part be the story it's telling itself? And what is the fear of what would happen if it
Yeah,
didn't do this?
yeah,
And I suppose, and you absolutely don't need to share, there was a little bit of me listening with curiosity and wondering, well, what was the fear of this part
yeah.
of what would happen if it didn't do this?
So I'm very happy to share. The fear was that it was that I would get too big for my boots. That
Mm,
was the fear, was that I
yeah.
would be so exposed that
Mm,
the true
mm,
the inverted commas around that word, the sort of the pain and the self-loathing that that part was holding would be
mm,
seen by others,
mm.
because I would be too visible, too exposed if I got too big for my boots. And so what it wanted to do was keep reminding me that
Yeah.
actually I wasn't all that.
So just to put that like in a to repeat that back in the language so people can really get a sense of how our protectors are loved. There's a protective part of you that had developed this way of kind of creating an ugliness to have a sense of diminishing your sense of power and worth. So that was how it did its job, and its fear was that if it didn't do that job, something would be felt and revealed. So be behind that will always be the wound, right?
And so
And
the
so the
wound
wound.
is, so your book is called You Have Always Been Enough. My
Mm,
fear has always been I am too much.
yeah,
And so that was the root
yeah,
of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so then that part that protected, like what did it need to know and hear in order to feel safe to allow you to now come to a point where you smile at yourself in the mirror?
Oh, oh, okay. What did you need to know? Just really
Only
check in
if
with
you're
her.
happy
It's been
sharing.
such a long time since she was in such a difficult place.
Mm.
She's laughing actually now. Um, yeah, what she needed to know was that she was safe with me. That's
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
She needed to know she was safe with me because she
Mm.
didn't feel safe anywhere. Oof, that's going to make me cry.
Mm.
She didn't feel safe anywhere.
Mm. Well, all of you is always welcome.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing that. It's because, we talk about this really profound practice and it's so abstract and there's such generosity in sharing and experience. because that's how we make sense of it. Because I'm sure there's so many. I mean, I can relate to what you've just shared, and I can feel like my heart is wide open right now, just with love for that experience and for all those parts of you. And it's sometimes just knowing, imagine if you work really, really hard every day in your life and you feel alone in that. And we don't even need to talk about parts to imagine this. Imagine you're the parent who feels like you carry most of the emotional load, or you're in a job where you're like carrying it all. Imagine how it feels if one day someone just turns up and goes, I've got you. Wow, you've been working so hard. I'm here now with you. You're not alone. I think we can probably all relate to how that would feel in a very felt, like tangible way. And that's what we're doing to these deep, tender parts of us that, are holding such great fears, like such great fears.
And also, what I notice is that she's now become a barometer for me. So if I notice that I'm cleaning my teeth and I start giving myself a double chin or or frowning as I'm looking in the mirror, it's like, oh, hello, honey. Like, okay, there's
Mm,
something going on here. There's something. So she is doing the task of letting me know
mm,
that
mm.
on some level, some part of me is feeling unsafe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so, I think it's really important to name that it's not that these parts disappear. I mean, they lessen
Yeah.
it, but they also still, as you say, become ways of letting us know, oh, hold on. I was just recording an audiobook recently, and it really made me laugh because as I was recording the audiobook for You've Always Been Enough, you have to obviously read the book. And they say once you've written something, never read it again. You have to read every single word of it. And so all my parts are coming up. At first, they were like, la la la, this is so exciting. I'm recording an audiobook with HarperCollins. This is amazing. And then a few hours in, I was like, oh my God, is this book okay? Is this like, is this all right? And then, like how many more hours in, I'm like, that's it. This is terrible. Everyone's gonna, like it was a whole, and I was reading like step two, which is all about the parts work. So I was literally reading, and then you have your protector parts, and this is what they do. And in the background, these parts are going, well, look, if everyone hates it, like if they really, really, really hate it, like if your entire business is annihilated, if you're destroyed, like, if you're shamed, if they heckle you out of the country, I mean, as if anyone's going to care that much, bless them. And but this is how it feels. Like, it was like, don't worry, because you can just move to Costa Rica and set up a surf camp. So, and then I was suddenly like, hold on, parts, hold on. Whilst reading my book about parts, there was a whole committee meeting going on, the part that needed a backup plan, the vulnerability, the shame, and they were all there and they just let me know they just needed me. They
Mm,
needed me. They've needed me a lot because it's a very vulnerable moment right now. Understandably, it's like really putting yourself out into the world and saying, here's my heart. What do you think about it? Um, and so I love that idea of it being a barometer, this inner language. And that's where the presence and the mindfulness practice always forms a foundation, because that's where we continually are building that capacity to notice.
mm,
Because we have to first notice. If we can't notice, then we can't unblend and we can't become the friend. And
mm.
that's why that's kind of the entry point in my experience, in my system.
I think something has yeah, there's so much in your language, and actually having picked up the book and also the astonishing honor, Sula, that I need to name, that you've
Mm.
included quotes from the My Darling Girl poems. I'm rubbing my knees for some reason. It's like I don't know sort of metaphysically what that actually means, but I'm holding my knees as I say this. I feel like a little girl. This kind of the fact that you've quoted words that I've written alongside teachers like Tara Brach and Thich Nhat Hanh and Mary Oliver. And it's
And yours is the first opening, like Poem. Yeah. I think, Henny, it's because I mean, one, your words are beautiful and I love them, but I think it also shows our connection and our resonance and the path we've both walked that is very interwoven because it's almost like you came on, and this is by no means me taking credit for your work. Your work is your own and it's beautiful. But it's like you came into a space that I held and I introduced you to a practice, and that practice turned into something which you evolved, and then we worked together with parts. And your we often joke, don't we, about what our medicine and what our love languages are, words. We talk about words. And it's like you took something and turned it into this beautiful expression which reflected back a teaching to me in a way that was so beautiful for me to receive and made so much sense of the teachings that I offered in another language that I then went on to offer on retreats. When I run my IFS retreats, the first IFS retreat I ran, I gifted everyone your book because I was like, there isn't a way I can put this better than my darling girl, there just isn't because it speaks so deeply to that. And so, of course, when we talk about befriending our parts, it would be your words that would, you know, speak
Mm.
so beautifully to that. Yeah. So thank you for letting me include them.
Gosh. Well, thank you for receiving them.
Mm,
I you're saying this place that you're in right now, it's very vulnerable, of course, because I know many writers, and often those who write fiction say it's much easier than when you write a book that is about yourself, that is kind of real life in some way,
mm,
because fiction, although it might have elements of your own story, um it's it's fictionalized, it's fantasy,
mm,
it's something sort of slightly separate, whereas your book, the thing that really struck me when I was beginning to read it over the weekend was just, oh my goodness me, Sula, I feel you in every word.
mm,
I really do. And I'm also, what it just sort of feels like, it is this beautiful um guiding hand, companion, guiding hand to
mm,
sort of to support you through these things that we've been talking about. How do you feel? What is compassion? Like, for so many of us, like, even understanding what that word actually is, or how do we start to deepen our self-awareness?
mm,
What are the steps that we can take? And what I love is that how you've, while there's, it feels to me like there's so much kind of poetry within, and lyricism within the way that you've written, it's also really rooted in very practical um, aspects of this work too. It's not esoteric and, wafty. It's really rooted and grounded. And and I think it's that principle that then enabled me to go on and do the learning and the training and the work that I've done. It's in a slightly different path, but it's still rooted in this work of self-compassion. Because for me, we can't change anything unless we know it's there. And
mm,
if we only know it's there in a really critical way, it's the way that we choose to change it is possibly going to be less far-reaching than if we can have self-awareness with self-compassion. If we can have those two things, like you say, the wings,
mm,
then the change becomes much more possible. And so,
mm,
you know, I sort of see this um yeah, this kind of, the place where you and I meet is feels so um oh, it feels so safe to me, actually. That's the word. Like, I have this deep sense of safety in the
mm,
sort of bottom of my belly, this rooted, grounded place of safety, which then means that now I can move on. I can take action. Um, I can find my way through things, whatever that might be. And yeah, was there another thought there? There was another thought. I think what that reminds me of is something that you said about that even in the darkest times, you've always had this sense of curiosity and this spark, this ability to keep moving forward.
Mm.
And I'd really love to touch on that a little bit, actually, if that's okay,
Mm.
because that feels really, really significant for so many of us, that when the days are really dark, when
Mm.
for me the language of the I have like a veil can come down,
Mm.
and knowing that I can move through is something that I didn't always have before. So I'd love you to
Mm.
talk about that.
Mm. So nice and light bit of it then.
Yeah, something really easy.
Something really easy to talk about. Mm. It feels like there are maybe two aspects to speak to. Maybe one is to start almost slightly more on the surface, it feels. So for those who can't see me, Henny and I frequently close our eyes, and we are very much somatic, body-based practitioners. We can't just answer. We have to like close our eyes and we have to listen to what we're feeling first. um, there is one which is perhaps a little bit more clear cut in a way, which is what is the alternative, and am I willing to choose that alternative? No. Okay, so I don't have a choice. I have to keep going.
Gosh, that's
So
the light answer.
that's that, or maybe that's the more straightforward, like
Mm.
what is I cannot choose the alternative, and that alternative has been in various degrees of extreme darkness and extreme pain. Um, some of the darkest moments, and it's like, well, that's if I'm at that crossroads, that's one way. I can't choose that. So that has picked me up from the depths in I always have an image of like an exhausted soldier, like, okay, then put another foot in front, one foot in front of the other and keep going, because what's the alternative? And I remember talking to another facilitator I've worked with a lot, who's phenomenal and has been through, she's a survivor of some very difficult moments. And we both agreed it was almost like, well, what's the alternative when you've been through a lot? So that's one which is in some ways slightly less hope filled, but it certainly speaks to our human resilience. And like, I don't know if you remember when you did your coaching training, I feel like they shared these, all people learning how to coach are taught about, the grass that will grow through tarmac, like it will always grow towards the sun, like nature always tries to grow towards the sun, and that is our human spirit and resilience. And then the depth behind that holds all of that is something different. That's my intuition. And so what I'm very grateful for, well, one is the resilience of that soldier that just kept going, but for the way that I've always just had a sense of something, and that I've had the courage, the capacity, the desperation, who knows, probably different in different moments, to listen to that.
Mm.
And almost to the point that I can't not. And that was really hard, because I remember being like in London at the end of my 20s. I worked in advertising, an agency. I had a very good job. I had an amazing opportunity. Two amazing opportunities comes up. Really unusual for that level of my career, my life. And it was really, I had a home there. I had a very kind partner. It was all there around me. Everyone was like doing the thing, the marriage, the babies. And I just had a feeling. I was like, I don't want the feeling, but the feeling was there. And the feeling took me to train in yoga, took me to travel around the world several times, took me so out of the comfort and certainty that so much of me craved. And yet I just had to keep following and listening to it. And so on the surface, what it looked like is I threw my whole life away with no idea of anything. And that was hard. There were many moments when it was really hard and it was really scary. Like, what am I doing? And yet in there somewhere was the feeling and just learning to trust that feeling. So I think there's two things within that, in those darkest moments. One is just like the gratitude for deep listening and the capacity to be kind of tugged by something beyond words, beyond clear answers, but a knowingness. And it's the same knowingness that I've surrendered to in my coaching. Like when I sit with someone, it's so beyond what I need to know now. I just listen. I mean, in shamanic practices, in medicine practices, energy medicine, we talk about being the hollow bone. It's like something that just comes through. So I think that's been the gift of that, being able to listen and just trust. Because when we can listen to that, it takes us so beyond the limitation of words. Words are wonderful, beautiful gifts. They are a love language, and they're also kind of limited because they're still created by humans, and by the head. And so um, being able to trust in the wordless and to follow that, even when it makes no sense, has been the comfort, I think, and the guide.
There's so much in there which resonates for me, and the phrase that keeps coming up is this well, trust has been a word that's
Hmm.
emerged several times as we've been speaking, and also this sense of what I would call my wisest, kindest self, the part that writes my darling girl poems. And
I would challenge that that isn't a part.
exactly, there we go.
I
And
would
it's
I would
self.
say that that's your self energy. I
Exactly.
would say that is the container that holds all of your parts. And
Yes.
that container is tapped into the infinite.
Yes.
And so it becomes like a transmission.
So I remember thinking when I first published that first volume of My Darling
Mm,
Girl, it no longer it doesn't belong to me. I didn't recognize writing any of the poems. Like I still turn to the book myself now. If I'm struggling, I'll still turn to the book and open up a page and just see what's there.
mm,
So the part of me that is needing the reassurance will turn to the book as a way of turning toward
mm,
myself, capital S. And I had this terrible fear as well that she was never going to speak to me again. The part at the
mm,
time that thought that she was something external from me. So when I was first writing these poems, it felt like it was something external from me that was
mm,
writing. And
mm,
I thought, oh gosh, is that it? Am I never going to hear her voice again?
mm,
And then through this work, recognizing that, to your point, of course, it's self. It's
mm,
the self that holds all my parts is actually, who has written all of these words.
mm,
And now my understanding is because I do reside in self in a way that I didn't know was possible
mm,
10, 15, 20 years ago. Um, I need to write to my parts less.
mm.
So the My Darling Girl poems don't emerge in the way that they
Mm.
flooded out of me when I was
Yeah.
first on the path,
Mm,
first on the journey. Um,
mm,
and so yeah, so I think. the sort of the upshot of all of that really is this sort of sense of the inner trust that I hear from you. You know, this what you
Mm,
call your sort of intuition and trusting that voice inside you that said, there's something else. There's something else, my darling.
yeah.
It's not this.
Mm,
And that can be very challenging, can't it? Because also, sort of through so much of our life in a very human way, according to our conditioning and the culture we grow up in, we're often taught to suppress that voice.
mm,
We're taught not to listen. You know, I ended up working for 20 years in financial services, which is not a natural home for me, I would suggest. You know, I mean, and I say that with deep love for everything that it gave me, everything that I learned in that experience,
mm,
and you know, all of the beautiful connections that I made with people through that. But
mm,
really, it's not a natural home for me. But
mm.
because I was suppressing the voice that was going, all you want to do is live in a field, Like, which I now
And
do.
y- and yet and yet and yet, had you tried to live in a field when you were 25,
Not have
it
done it.
wouldn't have been possible. And
No.
so it's so funny. There's a point in the book, and I remember my teacher Ayala saying to me, but if you could change who you were, would you? And you're like, hmm. It's actually, yeah. I invite anyone to reflect on that question. It's like, actually, no, because there is an essence, and it's like, behind that question was, where would I actually have to go back to in my life to change? And I realized I couldn't.
Mm.
I couldn't, in order to be in a different expression, there isn't like a moment. It would be to completely alter the essence of who I am in this lifetime. Like I'd have to go back to another lifetime to change this reality. And then you start seeing how everything is in a way unfolding in the timing and the way and in the moment that it needs to.
Mm.
I think that's why we talk about those soul journeys somehow.
And that the work arises when we need it to as well. And I
Mm,
think that that's also when I think about when books emerge into the
mm,
world,
hmm
or the moment when a book like lands in our hands, or you know, we pick a book up off a bookshelf, or you know, however it
mm,
reaches us, or someone recommends it to us, it's because on some level, some part of us understands that there's something here that is going to support us in some way on our journey.
Yeah,
And I'm deliberately being so like super vague about it all because it's so unique to
yeah,
us,
yeah,
you know, and what each person takes from your book will be different for them,
yeah,
you know, and I so I'm really mindful of like, you know, you've sent this you know, this body of work out into the world. And you've touched on it before and said, you know, that kind of like that sort of sense of vulnerability. But I just wonder, like, how is it now? Particularly seeing as the book decided to be launched itself like
yeah.
earlier.
It did. It launched almost a whole week early, spontaneously. No, in fact, it was a week early, spontaneously, on a full moon, which I love. It's very interesting. It does feel exactly as you and many others have said. It's no longer mine. It's out there. There's a real surrender now. It's out there. I mean, that said, my publisher did suggest that you never read reviews. But yeah, I'm certainly still human within that and still curious to know how it lands in the world. But it does feel like it's taken on an energy of its own. But even as I wrote it uh, as like a ceremony. I wrote it in ritual and in ceremony. I would actually drink cacao every time. I would open the space. I would light a candle. It would be like a prayer. And then I would say, like, let what comes through me. Obviously, there's me and everything I've learned and accumulated, but let it take on this intention of meeting the people that need these words in the way they need to be met. That will be meaningful to them. And so there's kind of the science, there's the psychotherapy, there's the wisdom practices, and then there's something alchemical that happens, which is called in through the intention of it, of may this reach whoever it needs to reach in the moment they need it. And I really trust that. I've worked with thousands of people on retreat, and I've just seen that my clients, I rarely have advertised my client work. People just arrive and we're always a bit like, where did you come from? And we're like, I don't know, but it's just they're almost like, look, here I am. I'm not sure why, but I'm here. I'm not even sure how I know about you, but I'm here. And so that's that trust. And I do think, it's interesting, at several points through this conversation, I've also just felt that word trust. And that is the greatest, the greatest gift any of us can have is self-trust. And I believe that IFS brings you into that connection, because it brings you into trusting that you can be that safe and secure anchor, and you can listen and meet yourself in the way that you need. But the more time you spend in that capital S self, the more time you spend in connection to something, whatever language feels true to your higher consciousness and intuition, spirit, God, nature, love. And so then you're like shrugging off some of the load of what it is to be human, because you're plugging right into this infinite source that's like there. If
Mm.
you listen, showing you and guiding you.
And that it sounds to me like it's in the most sort of beautifully perfect way, writing the book is the same practice as working with someone one to one, as working with group. It's about allowing, I'm going to use a phrase that often gets used, and it's a bit confusing in the context of the language that we've been using, but the sense of like taking ourselves out of the way. But
Mm,
actually, it's the opposite. It's like really being in self and
mm,
trusting that we'll find the way.
mm,
Because I know when I sort of first trained as a coach, and I was doing a lot of work in executive coaching, doing a lot of leadership coaching, and so spending time with other executive coaches, and they talk about all the preparation that they did before a coaching session. And I'd just be like, but how?
mm,
How can you do preparation? You don't know what the client's going to bring. Like,
mm,
you don't know what's been happening for them since your last
mm,
session.
mm.
Um, or,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's fun. It's funny because people ask me about my coaching. I'm like, it's really hard to explain to
really
you, because
hard.
I'm like, because everyone's different, and so I'm going to sit in front of you, and your journey is going to be different to the next person. But what I can guarantee you is that you and we will come into relationship with your system, and will transform your relationship to yourself, and
Yes,
everything will change from there.
yes.
Like that's because everyone is different, and will be met from that
Yeah.
place.
And so all of that knowledge that you have, all the knowledge of the psychotherapy and the practices and the
Mm,
trauma-informed somatic work, I know, that's all part of your offering, and the IFS, of course. All of that is there, but I really have this sort of sense of, just in the way that you talk about writing the book, I know, having worked with you, you have coached me,
mm,
um, that and recognizing the way that I work with others, it's about, we kind of like, the thing emerges that is needed in that moment. We don't have to sort of have this like rigid like preparation of
yeah.
like, here's everything and I'm going to bring it all in, immediately.
But that's ultimately what we're hoping to bring to our clients, isn't it? Because if we go back to mindfulness, and the essence of mindfulness is like, can I notice what is here, and can I be with it without changing it? Can I sit with pain? Can I sit with discomfort? Can I be with it without changing it? With that is this sense, when we have all the parts and we lay that, it's almost like, if we go back to those two wings of freedom, they're like the doorways that open into your system. And there's so much depth. You can go right into the depth of your parts. But then if you come right back up to the doorways again, it's like, can I notice what's here, and can I respond to it? And can I be with this? We're really creating the greatest self-trust that says, I don't need to rely on a certain set of circumstances in my life to be okay. I can trust that whatever life brings, I have connection to my wisdom and myself, that I will be able to navigate it in a way that is true to me. And that is freedom.
Which brings me back in this lovely alpha and omega of conversation, which is the bit that I hadn't pressed record yet. But I mentioned that I had been in conversation with someone this morning,
Mm,
and one of the things that they said today, I asked them just to let the part know, like whatever felt most true, like what was it that
mm,
self really wanted to let the part know. And they replied, well, they spoke and said, we are okay. We are okay. We are okay.
mm,
And it was this, for me, it felt like this, like the head, it's like we are okay. Like logically,
mm,
intellectually, we'll find a way, we have the answers, we'll work it out. Into the heart, we are okay. Like we can hold all of these feelings, we can
mm,
hold the pain, we can hold the hurt. And
mm,
then down into the hara, the wisdom in the belly, like, oh, we are okay. We are
mm,
okay. We are together. I found you.
mm.
I'm here.
Yeah.
And that sense of self-trust, that feels like the thing that you have been offering and are offering into the world,
Mm,
also recognizing that, it doesn't mean it's a magic wand and suddenly everything is going to be okay. There won't be any more potholes in the road. It doesn't mean that, does it? That's the thing. It's not a magic wand, but what it is a way in which um, we can navigate the world
yeah,
in a way that feels a little easier.
absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah. May we welcome more and more of that in for
mm,
each of us.
mm. Oh, Sula.
Mm.
So I have no idea how this conversation is going to be for anyone listening to it.
But we loved it though.
Oh, we loved it.
We had a great time. We hope that you're still here listening to us. Henny and I can talk for hours.
Also, what I really wanted to sort of do today was not to um uh not to sort of have like a kind of framework or a structure for the conversation, but to allow it to unfold, because I think that is what the work is. I think it is
Yeah.
a willingness to kind of hand ourselves over into the moment and see,
Mm,
well, what is here
yeah,
and
I
what
agree.
wants to be heard. So maybe
That's
we've
the
done
essence of that intuition at the end of the day, isn't it? Letting what needs to come forward flow.
that.
Uh, yeah, thank you for having me in your space
Oh
here.
gosh, gosh. The the absolute beauty of the circular nature of being sat here with you with that book
Mm.
there. Literally, that book has got your back, Sula. I just want to like name that.
Oh, I like that.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
like that. I'm gonna sit with that.
Mm.
Thank you.
And yes, and this connection with you. It's funny, I had a message from someone on Instagram about, I think I'd posted about your book.
Mm.
Someone messaged me and said, "Is that your Sula?"
I love that. Well, just to reflect that back, I had a client message me who's also a client of yours because she met you on retreat and then joined you on retreats. And she's like, I'm reading the book and I'm overwhelmed. She's like, it was already a lot because it was like being back with you. And then you put Henny's quotes in, and she's like, I'm sobbing on the sofa with joy. She's like, you and Henny in the same place. Yeah, so it's our Henny and our Sula.
Thank you so much, Sula, for being here.
My
Mm.
great pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, my darling. There we go. Sula's book. In fact, I want to say Sula's first book, because I have a suspicion there might be another one, or maybe more. Um, that come from the wisdom that she has gathered to her and holds within her. Anyway, Soulla's first book, You Have Always Been Enough, is out now, published by HarperCollins, and I've included a link to it in the show notes. If you're curious about internal family systems, if you'd love to understand more about how to find your way to this place of self-awareness and self-compassion and inner knowledge, then it's a beautiful, beautiful guidebook to have with you on your travels, I would say. And if you'd like to connect with Soulla, I'll put the link to her website into the show notes too. You'll have already guessed from, or not guessed, you'll have heard from our conversation that she runs retreats and she also works one-to-one. And yeah, if she calls to you, then her information is there. And also to say, if anything we've talked about today has activated anything for you, or sparked some thoughts or a desire to step a little bit deeper into this world of internal family systems, then Soulla's book has got some resources at the back of it. And also, just to say that this work can be something that we can explore either with the support of a practitioner, or through things like books, like Soulla's, and also through your own gentle exploration of the parts within you that are asking to be seen. And hopefully you'll have heard today that so much of this work really begins with treating ourselves as we would treat our dearest friend. And that's ultimately what self-compassion means. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here with Soulla and with me. We've loved spending this time with you. And I send you so much love and a hug and a wave.